I am Jed Leidezer, partner at March Capital. I'm really excited to be here with you today. This is a topic on everyone's minds. We're going to have a conversation about how AI is impacting cybersecurity, what threats and opportunities arise from that, and frankly, where money might be made from these trends. I'm joined by a stellar group of innovators, budget holders, and certainly industry veterans in this landscape. So really excited for this session here today. On my right, Dave Merkel, CEO of Expel, John Miller, CEO and co-founder of Halcyon, Noam Schwartz, CEO of ActiveFence, and Riki Sethi, CISO of Bill.com. We only have a short period of time, so I really want to get right into it. And Riki, maybe we start with you. I want you to help set the landscape. I mean, you're CISO of a public technology company. I imagine you're seeing kind of GenAI come up all the time in vendor pitches, but also as a surface area. Can you help kind of set the stage and what's real, what's not today out there in cybersecurity?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because in cybersecurity, we've been using AI to do security well for decades now. I mean, we've been buying technology with AI built into it, but now with GenAI, it's brought a whole new, it's like there's a buzz around new innovation in cybersecurity. And we've chatted about there's a lot of FUD and bullshit out there. And I'm probably getting pitches daily. I've talked to now a dozen companies that are leveraging or either protecting GenAI or doing something around securing LLMs or some kind of GenAI built into cybersecurity products. And most of it doesn't make sense to me. And it's like, I don't even see how this product is going to exist even a year from now. But then there's some interesting stuff that's happening too, right? We're kind of seeing interesting products in the security operations co-pilot, seeing some interesting things in the identity space where it does make sense, or existing products where they're leveraging GenAI in interesting ways as well. But that's kind of what I've been seeing. And now like ChatGPT and all of these things are kind of a word that we use almost daily. And then on the flip side, even on the attacker side, you're seeing them leverage AI in pretty sophisticated ways. We've heard more around deepfakes and things like that. And so there's some interesting things. And I shared the story with you, Jed, but like my 16-year-old is learning how to hack using GenAI too and ChatGPT. So I think it's creating a new just generation of attackers as well.
That's great. And where, I mean, you obviously have your organization and a number of CISOs and colleagues you keep in touch with. Where are these organizations in their kind of GenAI journey, and how does that relate to kind of cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think just I mean, when you're thinking about adoption of GenAI, so there's two ways that I see it. One is on the enterprise side and how companies are using GenAI internally. Some companies have said, we're going to block it completely, we're not doing it. And there's others that are saying, no, we're going to hop in and see how we can protect it. And then it's how folks are also leveraging it on the product side. Like if you're selling to customers, how you leverage GenAI to help your customers out in more meaningful ways. And there's some really interesting things being done there. And what I see from a security perspective, as usual, kind of lag behind the innovation that's happening in that space. But on the product side, still I see companies are kind of catching up to what they can do from a GenAI perspective.
And John, maybe I'll ask you to help us talk a little about the threats landscape. I mean, based on your background, you've worked 20 plus years, business, government, et cetera. I mean, what type of attacks are becoming more prevalent or more dangerous with GenAI?
Not a lot yet, to be honest, right? Like, there's definitely research going into it. We've seen, nation state governments start to invest in, I won't necessarily say GenAI, but AI in general to figure out how to, do things like restructure malware to evade signatures. I think the biggest threat that we're going to see is in phishing when it comes to GenAI, right? Where you can end up with perfect phishes, where if you actually use workflows with GenAI to send them, you end up with almost 100% guaranteed success rate, right? You can just send as many as you need to send until you connect.
And Merck, I'm curious, kind of the same. I mean, how is that We talk a lot about cybersecurity as this cat and mouse game, maybe the attackers and then defenders. What are you seeing as the balance of power shifted, as it kind of stayed linear fashion?
I don't know that we'd say it's shifted. So like business email compromise, phishing attacks, #1 attack vector for how many years running now?
Yeah.
A lot. And so I don't know that I see a balance of power shift. I do see a sort of maybe a step function increase in volume. To John's point, it's just easier to produce more effective social engineering. And that could be email, it could be SMS, it could be any place where a human would otherwise socially interact with another human to defraud them. So, I mean, fine. I don't want to be hyperbolic about that. Where I think it gets perhaps a little bit more interesting is as you add things like not just sort of social interaction, but video and audio, when you look at the impact less to enterprise-based attacks, but society-based attacks, so hooray, election 2024, woo, that's going to be, and we've already seen it. We've already seen AI-modified phone calls to sound like President Biden. We've already seen this happen. I think the social impact we're going to see and feel much more dramatically in the near term. The enterprise impact will ramp up, I think, gradually over time, hopefully not at a pace that we can't keep up with it with effective countermeasures.
A lot to unpack there. I think the social piece, the election piece, the deepfakes is quite interesting. Noam, if you would indulge us, can you talk a little about what your company does and what you're seeing out there?
Sure. So ActiveFence is an automatic content moderation software company, the largest in the industry today. And we help companies from big tech to small startups automatically protect their users, their advertisers, their community from harmful content. So anything from hate speech, child abuse, disinformation, and things around that. Now, what we're seeing from our customers, and everybody's talking about how to defend against GenAI. And I really understand what you're saying about so much bullshit and noise in the industry. And what we're actually seeing is there's a process of some sort of a democratization of how abuse is being done. It's way easier. It's in much better quality. A lot of more people are getting hurt. But the way that we're actually going after it and defending it is the same way. So I agree with the comment about phishing. We're seeing a lot of spam, a lot of hate speech, a lot of disinformation that is like in much higher quality, but there's no real difference in the way that we're detecting it. So there's so much noise, but the devil isn't that bad.
Okay, so I feel like you guys are kind of painting a picture of it's incrementally more challenging, but the defenders are also getting there with technology. Is that a fair way to characterize it? Or?
I mean, I think the other side of it is with the bar getting lowered, right? With technology making something complex like computer hacking more reachable, you also grow the attacker community, right? Where you have more people coming online because the chasm they have to cross to become an effective attacker keeps shrinking and shrinking.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, but so agree completely. And I don't think that's a new pattern because let's take topic du jour, ransomware. So it used to be you would have to understand and care about all the cryptographic nuance, figure out how to deliver a payload, figure out how to deliver sort of kind of the social engineering wrapper to get somebody to click, manage the ransom, et cetera, and now you can do ransomware as a service. So there's sort of a history of the commoditization of attacks. If someone can make money taking your stuff, they're going to try to scale that business the way a legitimate business would scale. So rather than me just ransomware one person, let me be able to ransomware 1,000 and sell that service to some other person that doesn't have the skill set. So it's this will sound terrible, democratization of attack capability, and it's not new. We are used to dealing with that as a defense community.
So I'm hearing like specialization of labor, I'm hearing like automation, I'm hearing kind of like outsourcing.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things is the ransomware attacks on MGM casinos and Caesars Palace weren't by the actual ransomware groups. They were by an affiliate called Scattered Spider. And they were able to get the tools of a group called Black Hat that's Russian-based, like FSB, GRU, and get these super advanced tools that they didn't have to understand how they work, they didn't have to build them, they just had to understand the systems administration piece to get it pushed out, and it's going to create a real like imbalance, right? I think in the next 5 or 10 years, as these, the Nigerian princes realize that there's way more money to make in ransomware than, straight trying to trick people like they used to.
Are they actually Nigerian princes?
I think so. I mean, they sounded legit to me.
Maybe for the audience, can you talk a little bit about what Halcyon does and other stuff you're seeing out there? If you could anonymize any examples, would love to hear them.
Yeah, so Halcyon is the first dedicated anti-ransomware company. So we have an endpoint agent that if ransomware runs, if it bypasses all of the security protections, we capture the encryption keys and can decrypt the endpoint, as well as we detect and block the data exfiltration that normally comes prior to a lockup, or in many cases now, they're not even bothering encrypting the machines. They're just stealing data and extorting money for that. But we work really closely with federal law enforcement and a lot of the big insurance companies and law firms to both come in after the fact, after someone's been ransomwared and get their business operations up and running, as well as proactively deploy on the endpoints and kind of mitigate the business risk.
And Merck, maybe a similar question for you. Can you talk a little about what Expel is and anything else you're kind of seeing out there in the threat environment?
Yeah, sure. Expel, what we're doing, we're going after sort of the legacy managed security services industry. So you buy a bunch of security stuff to protect your enterprise. You have to have people with talent to operate that stuff. In the past, you'd outsource it, much like IT outsourcing. And what we decided was, you can do the vast majority of this with technology, to include AI, absolutely, and still produce great quality outcomes at scale. So it's basically a platform that enables us to do that in a way with a certain level of cost efficiency that customers can't match. Kinds of things, I think we already mentioned a little bit, we do see like the social aspect from an attack standpoint is prevalent. We will still see some classic infrastructure attacks, although more and more if there's sort of an infrastructure attack, it tends to be cloud-based now as opposed to traditional data center infrastructure, which really is just a function of cloud adoption. Like that's where everybody's assets that matter the most are. Those are probably the two most interesting trends. To the point of this topic is, AI behind any of that. Almost certainly the social aspects of these things are increasingly being written by ChatGPT and related technologies. And so we see, continued steady increase in quality in terms of getting that first step kind of link click or kind of user compromise. The efficacy rates on that are increasing over time.
And maybe we went deep in the threat landscape, and I'm curious about AI as a surface area. You touched on this a little bit, Rinky, a bit earlier, but where are you seeing the risks today?
In terms of on the enterprise side, and I know we've talked about this, it really depends, right? And we hear about a lot of companies where they put really strong policies in place to not allow any kind of GenAI type capabilities. But in the case that you do allow these kind of capabilities, we've had this before, and we've talked about shadow IT and that kind of thing. But
so we have shadow AI now, or is it solved by the shadow IT
it's the
tools?
same problem as before. Right? Like you have tools like Grammarly and other products that have been around for a long time that are leveraging AI, and it's the same problem as before, I would say, from a risk perspective. I think that it's just having those strong controls as to how you're allowing vendors come in. And I think the bigger issue around risk is less on the security side, especially if you're building. It's more on the ethics and kind of safety, legal, privacy side, how you're protecting IP, all of that. What does it mean if you're having code generated by AI, like co-pilots and so forth? Do you still own the IP? And there's a lot of kind of legal privacy aspects to it. From a security perspective, like I mentioned before, I think it depends on how companies are deploying AI, both on the enterprise and the product side. And the kind of the way that security, I think, handles risks hasn't changed as it relates to AI or any other new technology that comes out. Yesterday it was cloud or whatever it is. As a new suite of products come out, we still have the same kind of processes in place to protect against that.
So to the extent you can talk about Bill and for some of these issues, is there like these working groups that are security and legal and compliance that are kind of spawning up to help shepherd the process, or how does that typically work?
Yeah, I think like some companies have like ours has been very proactive, and we've said we're going to allow most of this because somehow employees are going to figure out how to do it otherwise, and coming up with kind of a governance structure as to getting in front of it, basically saying here's kind of our standards around this, and then of course going through our assessments as to whether when we're building that, having early view into product security, making sure we're plugged in early as we're building AI models, or if we're purchasing, to make sure we're plugged in early, just like we would purchase any third-party vendor, we'd be doing the analysis there. And so yeah, we do come together with the different teams just like we would in any other product we bring into the company.
And Noam, help us understand, I mean, all of you use AI within your products, and so there's a big product security component. I imagine you had your DevOps or DevSecOps, and you had security throughout the life cycle. Now you have these machine learning kind of life cycle, so you do have some of that risk yourselves. How are you approaching this problem?
In pretty similar way. It's like the biggest risk for us while we were developing our technology in the past 6-7 years, and we were in an AI company before it was cool. We developed models to help our customers since day one. The problem was the contamination of the data, because what we're doing is doing very specialized models. We're able to detect hate speech in Indian languages, or things like child grooming in gaming scenery. And in order for that to be very, very accurate and also very safe to use and ethical, you need to train it like in the best way possible. So that was usually the biggest risk for us. Other things were not a big concern for us. It's not that our DevOps changed dramatically in the past year or so. They're better, they're using tools, they're more efficient, but it's not like groundbreaking.
Got it. Do you guys feel similar to Noam?
After you.
Yes.
Fair enough. Merk?
How do I follow that? What do I do with that? For us, the biggest concern we have in adopting the technologies and using them, I'm less concerned about like our dev process and QA and all that sort of stuff. It's about the edges of the technology that still do funky things. So if I plug an LLM into a bot that replaces my SOC analyst talking to a human, and the bot hallucinates in the context of a security incident, I have a problem because I just destroyed trust in a way I'm never going to regain. So we have to be very diligent about understanding the use case end to end and watching for those strange behaviors and figuring out how to adapt for that, because we work in a high trust environment. I have zero tolerance for any of those things. That's probably the biggest thing I worry about, is a fatal mistake, because we're typically interacting with customers at the go moment. Like they are in a tough spot, and the last thing they want to see is a little blue robot like talking about flying goats or something when we're trying to actually mitigate an incident. So we're trying to get to determinism in our utilization of things like large language models so that we can pull yet more humans kind of out of the equation and increase gross margin.
Got it. So you're talking about kind of using AI really for increasing margin, increasing efficiency, and obviously watching out for the ghosts of hallucinations and the like.
Exactly.
Also, to add on that, and also I see that with other CEOs, there's a lot of voices saying that GenAI can help you reduce the amount of time for development, and it's not really work like that in scale. So it's like for like MVPs, or like do all kinds of experiments and helping your junior folks to build stuff. That's 100%. But the thing that is really moving the needle for us in terms of AI in the past year is for sales and marketing. Our salespeople are way more efficient. Our marketing people are way more efficient. But in terms of R&D, not so much.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Improves the efficiency. I imagine it can improve some of the win rates as well, as you guys kind of build better and better technology and keep everything under wrap. Yeah, fascinating. I think a lot of people probably in the audience, whether they're a customer, potential customer, or investor, are probably wondering, there's a lot of companies, even at this conference, that say they do AI for cyber, probably AI for other stuff as well, sales, marketing even. What's some questions you would ask them to really dig into saying, like, do you really have a better solution? Or are you kind of maybe adding the AI a little aggressively?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'll take that on. I mean, essentially every information security company that I know is using AI or ML in one form or another now, right? Normally it's venture capitalists love AI, right? So everyone's going to try to wedge those words in as much as possible. Normally we're still dealing with traditional, at least in our space, right? Where if you take out the LLM chatbot stuff, it's normally, analytics, anomaly detection, processing of large data sets. Like the majority of security companies have data lakes, right? Like we're harvesting data back from our customers and trying to figure out, what's important and how to best apply it. But normally it's CNNs, right? I guess is what I see when I kind of dive into what people are doing, especially with, like platforms like Snowflake and Databricks. They've really democratized what it takes to build, legitimate, unique models in a cost-effective way. But I try to dive more into what's the value proposition that's provided. And, at the same time, I do have some trauma where I used to run research for a company called Silence that the big claim to fame was they were the first machine learning antivirus. And in so many ways, the message of that hurt us, where we were so focused on being that AI company that we would overlook, legacy technologies like signatures and heuristics, that when combined together, you get something that's much stronger, right? It might be less compelling from a marketing perspective,
Right.
to be like, yeah, I use AI now, but I use it just like I use signatures and heuristics and, cloud lookups and all of these other pieces. It's an important piece, but it's not more important than anything else.
So it's not just the models, it's the entire system and product.
Yeah, absolutely. The models AI is great, but it definitely has edges and, spots that it's not great at. Like my favorite thing I love when someone's, talking about how everything's going to change so quickly is to go to ChatGPT and ask it to draw you a room without a cat in it and watch what it gives you, right? Like it's still in its infancy, and using that as an optimization for human processes or large data sets, definitely isn't a cure-all to anything, but drastically increases efficacy.
Mark, what are your thoughts? I mean, do customers ask you about AI? Do you talk about it in your sales pitch? How do you address that?
If they ask, we will talk about it. We will also be guilty of aforementioned marketing.
You got to.
Because you have to.
Yeah.
So if we're asked about it, we'll just be real straight up with what we do and what we don't do. And we like to talk about impact. So if I'm going to tell you how I do something, I'm going to try to communicate what the benefit is, because frankly, what you're paying me for is the outcome. So let me at least try to relate, how it's relevant. What I'm finding, though, is I'm not getting asked that question by CISOs. And I've seen once or twice, if I lean into it a little bit too far, then I will get skeptical face. And then a lot, but cybersecurity people were born of a suspicious nature to begin with. And we're
Right.
also, if you've been in this industry for a while, we're very leery of the buzzword of the year, even though you end up having to use them. And so I find that if I do end up in that conversation, I'm getting questions not from a lean forward, I must have this thing, but from a skeptical, can you actually tell me what you do? Can you tell me how it works? If that person is sort of literate in whether it's machine learning or Gen AI or whatever it is, and they know where the edges are, they're going to ask me about the edges. And if I can't articulate a reasonable answer, then I'm going to start falling into the, you're one of those vendors that is marketing, but there's no substance. And so I don't view that as a new pattern. Every time there's some new interesting development in cybersecurity, and then your marketing jumps out in front of your product, you end up in that conversation with the security buyer.
Rink, is that accurate? Is that the way you see it?
100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. To me, it's what are you doing for us? Do you understand how my team is, where we're sophisticated, where we're not? There's certain technology companies that are coming out with these GenAI or AI capabilities that may not help me as where I have a really sophisticated security team. They're not going to necessarily help me, but they may be for earlier stage companies. And so I think understanding my existing capabilities and what can you add value to, and then we can talk about how you do it, which is when the AI component comes in to the point that's already been made. And so I think that's the most important thing. But I think just throwing these things around as buzzwords, it's like, oh gosh, here we go again. You built a Gen AI capability, and when we ask them to test it, it's like, it doesn't spit out anything specific to my organization, gives some generic responses. And so I think it's really getting that practitioner point of view on how these how they're leveraging AI even makes sense in what you need as a capability. Knowing that in cyber AI, like every company, if you're not using AI as a cyber tech company, that's a problem. They're not going to have kind of sophisticated tech to offer to begin with. But I don't necessarily, we don't even talk about that anymore. Like we looked at Expel a while back, and we know that companies are leveraging AI. It's more like, how are you differentiating from other companies and so forth.
Yeah, talking about the business problem, it sounds
That's
like,
right.
and really getting into that.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a good example when you're obsessing over like a buzzword like Gen AI. So weird things happening. Not just like investors love to hear about that. Also like customers. So you need to push it everywhere in your marketing materials. So if you didn't use AI, not just this year, in the past, like since forever, you were losing. So this is not new. And what we're seeing also ridiculous stuff. Like our customers, which has a lot of user-generated content, are asking us, hey, can you detect if this harmful content was created with generated AI? And I'm telling them, I could do that, but why do you care? It's like the fact that something bad was created with generative AI doesn't make it bad. The fact that the intention was to hurt people. So if phishing was created, with like someone wrote it, or use a random engine to do that, or OpenAI, who cares? So it kind of like drives people a bit crazy.
And just on that point, are you seeing customers come to you? I mean, it's not just deep fake or not. Are they looking for like fraud, financial fraud, and otherwise, like disinformation, misinformation? Some of the other examples, like where do you see as kind of the concentration areas?
So right now it's a lot about like child abuse, like pornographic photos of kids. Now people are afraid that there will be more of that, kind of like teenagers that their images will be created and things around that. But honestly, it's not new. It's something that we're countering unfortunately for many years, and but at least people are noticing that right now. So it actually brings like some more attention to the problem. However, Gen AI is really not the main thing here. It's about, if you're trying to harm someone, it doesn't matter how you're going to harm them. The fact that now it's easier to harm people, that's where we need to put our attention on, and how do we invest more in order to reduce those levels of harms.
So I think what I'm hearing, and it sounds like you guys are pretty much in consensus of, don't necessarily lead with AI. It's an important piece. It's making your solutions more efficient. Your financials probably look more efficient as well, and you're getting better at detections and response and automation and the like. And I think a topic that we kind of teed up a little bit in the description is, does this next generation of AI technologies, of large language models and transformers and the like, does it help create new categories and new category kings, or maybe not? And I'm kind of wondering with, similar to the cloud migration that happened, there's certainly cloud service providers created massive businesses. Now it seems really trite and banal to say like, this security company is a cloud security company. It's like, well, yeah, of course it is. You don't talk about cloud software as much anymore as you used to. does it just get baked in any security solution? Or, Merck, maybe I'll ask you, because I think you've seen a lot of this journey with the cloud side. How does that compare to what's going on now?
Yeah, so I do think there will be new categories. There'll be new categories of protection products to protect whatever category of attack comes up when somebody wants to go after your LLM or your LLM-enabled solution. A good example, I was looking at Ars Technica this morning, and there's some interesting research that came out of Cornell where they sort of, LLM-enabled an email gateway, and then LLM-enabled an attacker, and then attempted to build sort of the AI equivalent of the Morris worm to get a self-replicating attack by an AI talking to an AI. And it's actually a really great discussion because they built a bunch of really good analogies to present-day attacks. So they could say, this attack and the way that this looks is akin to this attack, cool, but you can see the way that it goes off. It's going to require a different set of detection technologies, mitigation technologies to be effective. So I think it will start, as it always does in cybersecurity, as a new set of point solutions focused around that specialty. And then as customers figure out how they're actually going to use this technology in the enterprise, as they figure out which products they're going to adopt that have it baked in, and then begin to understand how that makes them vulnerable, they'll start to have more opinions and demands for how those products should show up as part of things like platforms. How much should this kind of protection around the way I'm utilizing AI come baked into this sort of large language model as a service versus how much do I expect to have to buy, kind of an application security technology equivalent for AI. So I think we're going to see that same cycle happen because it's just how innovation works. If on the security side it plays out like it has on sort of the exploration and adoption side, it'll move faster than the cloud transformation, but the same cycle will happen. And so you'll see it, but you're going to have to move quick, I think, to take advantage of it, which also I think is relevant to how you think about investing in it.
That's a good point. I think when we've looked in the past around computer and mobile and cloud and now AI, each adoption cycle is about half the time.
Shorter, yeah.
Shorter. And so it seems pretty inevitable.
I think so.
John, I saw you nodding a little bit to this. I mean, do you share that perspective, or how would you, kind of see this similar to cloud, or how do you see this evolving?
Yeah, I don't know, right? Like, I feel that we're still like a generation before we get there, if that makes sense, right? Like, I think we're really close, right? And everyone can see the potential of what's to come, right? But I'm waiting for that industry.
So it's begging the
category.
question, like, what's the catalyst? What's the Sputnik moment maybe, or some other thing, Morris worm moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, think about worming it as a perspective, right? Like, being able to have an AI that can run a network discovery scan, figure out, what's responding, what's vulnerable, interact with something like Metasploit, deploy something. You can connect those dots now, essentially, right? It's just the contextual understanding, right? Like, LLMs are all about language, and we need to get it to a point where it, can go a level where you're not like, here's a vulnerability, here's it in written language, take it to written language, back to, action, I guess, is what I'm waiting for. I offered to build an AI hacking system for the government, and they told me they didn't want it. It terrified them, right? But I think stuff like that is going to be inevitable, right?
Yeah, sounds like an arms race.
Yeah, well, and the problem is, if you're looking at it as like a cyber arms race, we're not as good as adopting new tech for cyber offense as our adversaries now, right? Like, China and Russia are more willing to pick up something that's new and potentially dangerous and try it out than the U.S. government's willing to. So it does put the potential of a power dynamic change, right, in the future.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, scary stuff, but fascinating at the same time. Um, I'm curious, when you talked about the value part of the conversation, Mark was touching on this, does value kind of accrue to some of the incumbents? Incumbents could be viewed as the Microsofts of the world. We talked about, maybe they bake in, don't hallucinate into like the open AI APIs. Can you help kind of predict the future for me, Rinky, or at least how you see it now? Where are you looking for like outside solutions potentially, maybe not now, but next 2 years, let's call it, versus where you say, hey, I might get that from an existing provider?
Yeah, and like I gave my very skeptical point of view and cynical point of view, so I'll give the more optimistic side. Like I do take calls like from vendors that are doing stuff in the AI space. I'm interested in what's going to happen. I still think it's a little bit further down the line, and I think like the VCs that I connect with too, they're also like, how should we think about this? We see this interesting company, they're already doing good ARR. Like, what do you think, right? And I'm like, I can't believe they're doing ARR like that. It just doesn't make sense to me with what they have built. So I am taking calls, and there's some really interesting, I think, in some cases, I'm expecting the big companies to build in capabilities, but in some cases, I think there's an opportunity to really look at things differently, and there's some new innovators coming, and I think like design partnerships and things like that, but I still think it's a couple years down the line. It's gonna be faster than cloud, I totally agree with Mark on that, but I think it's gonna be like still a little bit of time, and I think security teams and companies are still lagging a little bit, and it depends like how companies have adopted LLM in GenAI, again, both on the product and enterprise side, but I think they're, from a security side too, we kind of generally tend to lag, and so it's gonna be interesting to see what players come up, and I'm definitely interested, and I talked to a lot of folks, and there's a couple really interesting things that are happening.
And there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience. I'm curious to hear some of the mistakes. What are the biggest mistakes like entrepreneurs make when they're trying to pitch you?
I think they think that the pitch is the same across every CISO and every company they're talking to, just assuming that what capabilities I have in place. Like there's areas that I may not have strong capabilities and areas that we're really, really strong in. Understanding what kind of business I'm in and whether I'm fully cloud or not, and those kind of things before coming and pitching something that's only on-prem, for example. Just I always say, like, I think it's really important to understand the business, and if you really want to get, if I'm going to take the call, it's got to be a meaningful email or meaningful call that comes in, like making sure that they understand what my pain points might be. And that goes not just in the AI space, it's like, that's a general rule of thumb.
Right.
But I can't tell you the number of entrepreneurs that just get it wrong. And at the end of the day, it's a people business, more interested in the founding teams and what they're gonna be able to do years from now. And so I'm always in it for the long term. And to me, that's the most important part, is understanding the players and building that relationship and partnering with vendors like that care about that.
And Noam, I might call on you as well. I mean, you came from the Israeli ecosystem that's very well known for creating a lot of companies, a lot of cyber companies, and in particular, what mistakes do you see from the budding entrepreneur side?
I think the biggest one is running after specific buzzwords, like we spoke about right now, and building a company based on that. So it's like, hey, there's a cool feature. We will prevent data from leak to some implementation of GenAI, and we'll build a company, and we'll talk some investor to pay to invest in that, and maybe you can fool some CISOs to actually buy this thing, but they won't really use it, and people are spending a lot of time, a lot of money, wasting years doing that, and I think this is the biggest problem, at least that I see. Also now with young entrepreneurs, like running after problems that aren't really there, and it's very hard for them to recognize that. It's also to your question, it's like talking now about what will happen with LLMs and AI. It's like talking about the social, like what happened with the social and mobile revolution when Foursquare went out. Like it was very early, we didn't know anything, and it changed so much since, right? So here it's the same thing, and it's almost inevitable that those mistakes will happen because it's part of the journey, but I don't think that people are thinking through how is this actually playing out.
Like, is it a feature versus a product versus a company?
Yeah,
Maybe how real is the market?
exactly.
But you touched on team as well, and I heard Rinky talk about that. You want the long-term partner, people that are going to pivot and iterate and make something meaningful.
Yeah. But again, like finding the right problem in a market that is really there. Because there's so much noise, people kind of like pretend markets when there's not.
Yep.
But like, I have a question, by the way. You talk about the entrepreneurs coming to you and talking about and not talking to your strengths and weaknesses. How do you recommend them to know more about that? Because they can understand the business from the outside, but they don't know what you're good at.
Yeah, like most entrepreneurs, they have investors, and investors know the companies really well. Like I think leveraging their investors even to say, hey, tell us more about what you know about Rinky or about Bill or about whatever company it is, and leveraging the network, right, or other CISOs. And I think it's like we're to understand like empathy from the CISO, at least on the CISO side, is like we're getting inundated with emails, cold emails from vendors with all kinds of marketing stuff. And it's like so overwhelming that it's just better not to respond to anything. But if there's a more personal touch and something more meaningful, I'm more likely to respond to it. And so I think using your VC network, and then of course, if there's anybody from the network that brings, it'll probably get a response, or I'm going to be more interested in hearing about it. But yeah, it's doing just even a little bit of research about what have I posted about, or on LinkedIn or whatever. And I think you can do a little bit of deep dive on what's, what is she interested in talking about.
Fair enough.
And I would love to. I had a few conversations, and I think it's been the mind of a lot of public, private investors. Cash talked about platformization at Palo Alto Networks, and then we heard earnings from Okta and Zscaler and CrowdStrike that were probably not on that same page, at least from the spinning fatigue standpoint. I'm curious kind of how you guys see the world, and Rinky, this includes you as well. Are you seeing a push to consolidate, or not really from the CISOs and customers you speak with?
I'll give my perspective first. Like the consolidation's happening. You're seeing all these companies getting bought out and things like that. And so if you're already on one of those platforms, it kind of. But my personal thing is I'm going to go I like trying new tech. And so if there's something super interesting out there, we're going to go with that. Also, our budget's not unlimited these days. So if there's something more cost effective and not perfect, but that it might get to a stage for what I need, we're going to consider things like that as well. So I think it's interesting that folks are predicting that the future is going to be these several large platforms. I still think there's room for a lot of the other players too. And for us, we'll try the newer vendors, and even when they're ready to do design partnerships, we'll hop on.
And are you guys, is that coming up in your discussions as well?
It's huge, right? Like everyone's pushing for consolidation, but if you have enough value, right, there's always space for a startup to come in and do something unique, right? And then hopefully grow with the customer.
Maybe a question just to end on. We got about 2 minutes left. If we think about 2 years from now, and look back on this conversation as kind of a post-mortem, positively, negatively, what's one big surprise that could be? What are we giving a 10% probability to that could actually have a 70 or 80% probability to in the realm of AI and cyber?
Oh, that's a hard question.
All right, I'll look stupid first, and then everybody else can look smarter. Where I would be surprised is just so our own utilization of AI. I want to be able to take, my software can provide this much insight today, if this is the full continuum of human insight, and it can do this much human computer interaction today, where this is human to human interaction. If I can move that needle 20 or 30%, then I can drop all that to my gross margin and it's a meaningful uplift. I would love to be surprised that I can double the impact of that, right, and move even more humans out of my business. They're still humans, but move them even further out of the picture. And so 10% likelihood of being, of exceeding my expectations on the degree to which I can eliminate human judgment in the delivery of what we bring our customers today.
I like that. John, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge, right? Like the second you can use AI to do analysis that's only possible by a human now, you win as the CEO, right? You know, I'm excited. I think the next couple of years, you know, AI assisting coding is going to be a big deal for me, right? Like, especially as a, you know, a software startup founder, you're always looking to make your development dollars stretch, right? And if you can noticeably increase the output of your engineers, you know, venture capitalists shouldn't have to, they could write smaller checks, right? And, you know, founders could own more of their company. I don't know. I mean, definitely my head goes to the attack side, right? You know, I think that you're going to end up with the high sophisticated attackers really, you know, over the next few years, truly adopting it, right? For the exact same performance gains, which is, you know, you now have the same attackers, only they're, you know, 50% or 100% more efficient. And then on top of it, more attackers stacked onto it. So you just get into this, you know, ever-growing problem where you know, Dave and I have been doing security for a long time, right? And every day it gets worse, right? Like, I think that we've kind of failed. Because it's not like overall the attackers have been like, oh, we can't give up, we can't do this, we're going to give up. And, you know, I think that's just going to continue to trend, right? Like, especially with economic downturns, you know, people get more desperate, and it's, especially with cybercrime now, it's essentially easy money.
Noam, to you, are you going to take us in a positive or negative direction?
I'm sorry?
What's one thing that we're kind of underweighting that could be big in the future?
In AI specifically, like
AI and cyber.
Yeah, so I'm not in the cybersecurity space. I mean, adjacent, but I think that AI is not a strategic change. Like GenAI and AI, what as we're describing now, is not a strategic change for the cybersecurity as we see it today. It is strategic change in you know, medical devices, in agriculture, everywhere that precision is like the most important thing. I think here we're kind of like forcing it. We're trying to find where we can use it, where we can leverage it. There's a lot of like talk around that, but I don't think this is like a strategic change. I think it's strategic change in the efficiency of attackers, for example, but it's not necessarily something that is going to change companies, you know, from one way or another.
I completely agree.
Rinky, any differing perspectives there?
Yeah, I remember reading an article that I think developers, like AI will replace developers, and you know, people shouldn't pursue CS degrees. I don't believe that to be true at all. I think on the other side, the part that really worries me is the lack of diversity in tech. And it worries me as to like what we're going to be building, and is there going to be bias introduced, and then are we going to have to build solutions to treat that? And so I think the more diversity we can have in what we're building in terms of models, the more we can remove bias, or at least come up with tech that's built well. So I really hope when we're talking about this in the future, we're not looking back saying, hey, we should have like fixed this problem back then.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect point to end on. I learned a lot. Hope everyone else did too. Thank you. Thank you all for coming here. Terrible weather, but we'll have drinks here shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much.